News Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brady Batista, give me the rock. Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Friday, September 19th, 2025. It's my official duty to welcome you into episode 496 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Well, you know that we're getting close to the start of the season because this is your second podcast of the week and second in 3 days. We've got a little bit to talk about here. As mentioned on the last podcast and as teased on the last podcast, we got the full Ohio State men's basketball schedule. The Big Ten unveiled its full schedule on Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock show on the Big Ten Network. And we also got some conference tournament news that I want to get to here in a moment. But I just want to run over a couple of thoughts that I have on this podcast and encourage you as well to send me your thoughts, because my number one takeaway from this involves you, the fans. And I'd like to hear from you if I'm reading this accurately and if I'm accurately expressing how you feel. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I certainly want to be listening to those of you who are following this program and are invested in this program and bringing you the content that you want, as well as reflecting your opinions and your thoughts and what you want to see. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you listen to this and you think, that guy has no idea what I feel, or this guy has no clue how the fans actually feel about all this. But I have a feeling we're all going to be in agreement on my number one takeaway here as we dive into this schedule. So it's not going to be a super long podcast, but I did want to just get into some of my thoughts and get those out to you before we hit the weekend. So we'll do that here in a second. Before we do, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you enjoy your favorite podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll automatically get the newest ones just as soon as our man Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, can grab them and publish them for us. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review, please click 5 stars, and please consider telling a friend. Thanks everyone who's taking the time to do all those things. We are closer and closer to the start of the season, so it's a great time to get some people back into the podcast and introduce them to this little ecosystem we've created over here. We are really close to the start of practice. As I mentioned in the last podcast, the Buckeyes will have their first official fall practice on Monday. So things will start heating up here pretty quickly, leading into media days in early October. Exhibition game with Ohio University on October 26th. Before then, they will have a closed secret scrimmage against Tennessee. We won't get to see that. Hopefully we can glean a few things from how it goes down. But a month from today, well, a month and a week, excuse me, we'll be watching Ohio State play the Bobcats at Value City Arena. So things are going to start heating up here pretty quickly. So great time to get into the podcast. And it's great that a month and a week from the first the only public exhibition game of the schedule, we have a full schedule. It's kind of wild, like how late in the year this is. And it's technically not fully complete. I mean, we have all the games, we have the dates and the opponents, but we don't have the tip times yet or the broadcast information. That stuff is apparently still being ironed out, and presumably we'll know those things before. What do they say? Major League. Hopefully, we'll know more information about these guys before their first at bat. At some point, we'll get this information and we'll know whether these are day games, night games, what have you. But at least we know what days and where Ohio State will play each of its 2025-26 games this season. And we had the non-conference schedule release a little while back, but now we can fit in some of these. We see where all the Big Ten games fit in. And I'm not going to run down a list of 20 conference games and read off all the dates. That wouldn't exactly be the most thrilling audio, but a couple that immediately jump out. Certainly the first 2 games that get sandwiched in there in early December. Since the league expanded to 20 games, they will play 2 in early December, and then the final 18 once the calendar flips. You do have the Buckeyes open at Northwestern on December 6th. the Saturday. And then they will host Illinois, rather, 3 days later on Tuesday, December 9th for the home conference opener. So good home test right off the bat for the Buckeyes. The Illini, once again, I would imagine them to be in the upper quadrant of the Big Ten, and we'll get one of the first looks at the international roster that Coach Brad Underwood has built. So excited for that one. Again, it's a Tuesday game. And that's an interesting run for Ohio State that's really going to go a long way toward telling us where this season could be headed, because the Buckeyes will play at Pitt on Friday, November 28th. That might be a day game. Still waiting, again, on information on that, but that'll be at Pitt Friday, November 28th. And the Buckeyes are off for a full week before going to Northwestern on December 6th, hosting Illinois on the 9th, playing West Virginia in Cleveland on the 13th, and then playing North Carolina in Atlanta in the CBS Sports Classic on the 20th. So it's not a compact slate. Ohio State between Friday, November 28th and Saturday, December 20th will only play 5 games. And each one of those, essentially each one of those games almost has a week in between. But you're talking 5 high major opponents right off the bat. And I would imagine actually, this would be an interesting over-under. Pitt, Northwestern, Illinois, West Virginia, North Carolina. Of those 5, how many teams make the NCAA tournament? Well, if we set the over-under 2.5, that's a really juicy question. I got Illinois for sure. Carolina spent a ton of money on its roster, and Hubert Davis has to make the tournament this year, but I don't know. West Virginia with a new coach. That's not... I've heard some good things about Pitt, and I think that the program as a whole might be headed in a better direction than maybe what the ACC has historically shown us here these last couple of years. But I don't know if I'm ready to call them a tournament team yet. So at any rate, those will be 5 high major games right off the bat for Ohio State there that will be really interesting to see, kind of get a temperature where the team is, as well as it will give them opportunities to work on stuff. You will have finals mixed in there, but this will be a team that will have opportunity, playing at Pitt and then having more than a week to prepare for Big Ten play. And then you play 2 games that week, then you go play West Virginia, then you have a week, and then you play Carolina. They'll have opportunities in there to actually work on some things. And that could be a big part of the year for a Colin White, who has missed so much time this offseason due to injury. Those are opportunities to stack practice days for guys. So that's a segment of the schedule that does intrigue me for that reason. And then Ohio State plays Grambling State on Tuesday, December 23rd. And then the Buckeyes are off for almost a week and a half. And then here's where it really gets interesting is the Buckeyes will play 9 games in January, and included in those 9 games will be the West Coast road trip. Ohio State will get that out of the way rather early this year. They go to Oregon and Washington on January 8th and January 11th. Then they have 6 days off. That'll be the longest break between games for the rest of the season once they resume Big Ten play on January 2nd. But you have a slate of 9 games in 1 month, 2 of which are on the West Coast, and also included in there is then a 6-day break between going to Washington, playing there on Sunday, January 11th, and then coming back and playing UCLA at home on Saturday, January 17th. So in between, Ohio State essentially plays every 3 days. And what the Buckeyes are able to do in December, how they're able to utilize that time off, that gap between some of those early games, the gap between Grambling State on December 23rd and then at Rutgers on January 2nd, that's going to be critical because you're dealing with a compressed schedule there in January that also includes a West Coast trip. So really fascinating month when you look at it and you think about how compact those games are. And then you look at that and you realize that part of that is because this team is playing Virginia in the middle of the Big Ten schedule. And that also adds to why does Ohio State maybe have as much time off between some of its early non-conference games as it does? It's that Virginia game on Friday, February 14th. Ultimately, we'll see how this plays out. And Jake Diebler has said he talked to both Brad Underwood and Duke's John Shire about them playing at Madison Square Garden in the middle of their conference slate and how much they appreciated that and how beneficial that was. Something we're going to monitor here going forward if this is a one-off or if this becomes a regular thing. But the consequence on the rest of the schedule is that you have 9 games in January and you have some breaks earlier in the season as opposed to later. It's going to make depth all the more critical, I think, the way the schedule sets up, given the pace of some of these games. And so once you get into February, and here's the thing, this is my number one takeaway, even if this wasn't the number one thing that I started talking about, but the fact that Ohio State has weekend home Big Ten games, and not just home weekend Big Ten games, but home weekend Big Ten games against teams that I think Ohio State fans want to see, because as the league continues to expand and you're dealing with a 20-game schedule and an 18-team league, it gets more and more difficult for fans to see the teams that they want to see Ohio State play. I mean, it's just the way that the schedule breaks down with 7 teams you only play at home, 7 you only play on the road, and then 3 that you play home and home. We saw this significantly last year, and certainly the way the season went and the general, sense of apathy that has seeped into a portion of the fan base resulted in some really uninspiring crowd situations last year. And that's what happens when the Big Ten gives you Washington on a Tuesday night at home as one of your 10 home games, and a senior night game against Nebraska that tips at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. There's a reason, aside from just needing to win more games, and aside from the fact that the shot could use a complete, redo, it doesn't help the fan base at all to then add another barrier to the enjoyment of going to a game when you're starting games on weeknights at 9:00. When you're constantly playing road games on weekends, and then if they want to come watch you play at home, it's a weeknight, it's a late night, or maybe it's a 5:30 or not 5:30, like a 6:00 tip or something. We've seen some of those as well, where the games are early and people can't even get there in time. And winning solves a lot of this. So let's not kid ourselves. And if Ohio State had made the tournament the last 10 years in a row and things were humming at a high level from a March standpoint, it would probably almost certainly be a different story. And every Big Ten coach wants weekend home games. Every coach would go to bat for that. Every coach would certainly make that point. That's what we want to do. That's our best chance to get home games, it's our best chance to get our best crowd and our best chance to bring in recruits and build momentum and all those things. And that matters in a league that annually leads the country in attendance. So I say all that to say Ohio State schedule last season was sorely lacking in home weekend games. Jake Diebler raised the issue at the beginning of the season before he had coached his first game as the official head coach. And the Big Ten listened, because you're now talking about an Ohio State schedule this year that has UCLA at home on Saturday, January 17th. First time UCLA has come to Ohio State's campus since 1968. And then when you get to February, Ohio State in February and March will play 3 home weekend games against teams that I presume Ohio State fans are going to care about. You got Michigan on Sunday, February 8th. You got Purdue on Sunday, March 1st. And then you got a senior day on Saturday, March 7th against Indiana. So if you're an Ohio State fan, what programs do you want to see come to Value City Arena? I mean, I think Michigan, Indiana, Purdue. You could put Michigan State on the list. The Buckeyes only play at Michigan State this year. And as a quick aside, how weird was it last year that Ohio State did not go to Michigan? They didn't play at Michigan or Michigan State. That was so bizarre not to make that drive at least once. But this is an Ohio State team that now will, like I said, in February, we'll have 5 home games in February and March. Sunday game against Michigan, a Wednesday game against USC. Maybe that's a late tip. A Tuesday game against Wisconsin, and then a Sunday game against Purdue, a Sunday game against Indiana. I'm happy for you fans. Here are chances. Here are opportunities to go to games that you care about, against teams that you care about. And that to me is the biggest takeaway from this schedule, is that Ohio State fans will have easier opportunities to go to games and not only easier opportunities to go to games, but to go to games against teams that they care to see Ohio State play. I would feel a little bit differently if this was instead of Michigan, Purdue, and Indiana, if we were talking Penn State, Rutgers, Washington. And I'm sorry to keep picking on Washington, but and I think they'll certainly be better this year, but they're one of the least compelling teams in the league. They just are to me. So that's one of my biggest, most prominent takeaways is just that the Buckeyes will get home weekend road games against teams that people care about. And adding and tacking on to the end of that is the fact that we don't know, again, start times, things like that. But what kind of crowd is Ohio State going to have for a Saturday home senior day against Indiana? Like, what kind of crowd is going to be there for Bruce Thornton's last home game? I was asked about Bruce. I was on 97.1 The Fan on Thursday evening to talk about the schedule, and we were talking a little bit about Bruce. And like, obviously, there's one thing that's missing on the resume, and we've talked about that. And I think that's probably goal 1, 2, and 3 this year. Is that Bruce Thornton has never made the NCAA tournament, but like in an era where nobody stays, in an era where nobody sticks around, to have a 4-year player like that who will be a 4-year captain, possibly the school's all-time leading scorer, is going to have his name prominently featured in essentially every major statistical category, minus rebounding, in Ohio State's career record books. Like, they got to make the tournament, and that is certainly like the one thing that is lacking there. But like, you like to see guys get appreciated for doing the thing, for putting in the work, for sticking it out. And I'm, I think back again to last year, and even a player like Kalen Etzler, who essentially never really played, but was at Ohio State for his whole full college experience, and was in practice and was there. It was part of the team. And his senior night they barely got 10,000 fans in there because it was a 9:00 start against Nebraska. Like, that stinks. That stinks for the players. That stinks for their families. That stinks for like the people who want to just come out and give them a send off. So in the case of Bruce Thornton, like, talk about deserved, and like I cannot wait to see that environment. I think that's going to be a special day. I think that's going to be one to remember for sure. And I'm happy for a guy like Bruce to have that kind of opportunity and to have that kind of game on the schedule, and to know that this is how it's going to go out. The last home game is going to be against the Hoosiers on a Saturday, and not against the Cornhuskers on a Tuesday, or the Huskies on a Thursday, or what have you. So in the long and the short of it, I'm happy for the fans. I'm happy for you that are listening. I think now we'll see which games end up on Peacock, because I will hear from people when that happens for sure. But overall, I think this sets up as certainly a schedule that is going to be challenging. I think that the mix between who Ohio State plays on the road and at home, I think it's pretty balanced. I think Ohio State's single plays and double plays pretty decent. Getting Michigan a home and home there, like, that's good for the sport. That's good for both programs. I'm glad to see that happening. I'm glad to see Jake Diebler and Dusty May advocating for that and having that. We knew in April that was going to be the case, but I'm glad to see that on the calendar. Overall, I think it's a schedule that they don't have to go to Purdue, so you got that working for you. And road games, I'll just run down these real quick. At Northwestern, lower Big Ten road experience, or lower half Big Ten road experience. At Rutgers, that's a Friday night. The rack will be rocking, I would imagine. We'll see how good the Scarlet Knights are this year. At Oregon, at Washington, no idea. At Michigan, that's going to be electric. That's a Friday night as well. At Wisconsin on a Saturday night, that's going to be packed. That's going to be loud. That should be a fun one. At Maryland, Ohio State is kryptonite for Ohio State. That's a Thursday game, so we'll see on that one. At Michigan State, difficult place to win unless you got a Dale Bonner. At Iowa, I've seen Ohio State games go both ways. at Carver Hawkeye. At Penn State with Northwestern, one of the bottom tier road environments. And that's the last Big Ten road game. In between Purdue at home on Sunday, March 1st, and Indiana at home on Saturday, March 7th, the Buckeyes will go to Penn State on Wednesday, March 4th. All right, so those are some of my just top of mind takeaways. Like I said, I didn't want this one to run too long, especially being the second podcast in 3 days. I don't want to burn out Patrick Flaherty's ears any more than I already do. So we're going to wrap this one up, and we're going to head into the weekend. I got a couple of stories I'm working on here, and I'm planning on hopefully getting something out to you guys like Monday or Tuesday. I will, as just a PSA, I will be off for 3 days next week. I'm having knee surgery, so I'll be off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and should be back at it the following Monday. If there's news, perhaps I can podcast from a disabled state. I'm not sure. We'll see how mobile I am and how all this is going to go. But if there's news, we'll see what we can do. But I'll try to get you another podcast maybe Tuesday to hold things over and see where things stand until I head out. So enjoy your weekend. Go out and appreciate the warm weather while we still have it. And if you're bored, come watch my Bull Sharks. My oldest team is we're chasing a WYBSL championship and had a big win on Thursday night. It was really exciting, and love getting to see those kids out there playing their hardest and chasing their dreams. It's just the best. It's just the best. So enjoy your weekend, everybody. As always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thanks again for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty for getting us out. Yeah, I'll try to record something on Tuesday, so look for that in your feed Tuesday or Wednesday. Until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.